مجال الراديولوجي، رغم ان كلهم راديولوجيست، انما الناس دي كانت من الفيري ايرلي ادوبترز اوف artificial intelligence، وكان عندهم الشجاعه في الوقت اللي معظم اللي حواليهم ما كانش عندهم ثقه قوي في الذكاء الاصطناعي، ان هم يبذلوا مجهود ويتعلموا، مش بس يتعلموا ويطبقوه. ودي اهميه وجودهم معانا النهارده، لان هم خدوا الخطوات اللي احنا بنحاول ناخدها النهارده وهنبدا ناخدها، خدوها من حوالي 10 سنين. فاتمنى بالكام محاضره اللي هنقدموهم لنا وتعرفنا عليهم ان احنا نبدا طريقنا ويكون لهم دور معانا في الادوبشن اوف اي اي في الكليه بتاعتنا في الجامعه، واتمنى في البلد كلها. اول واحده نينا كوتلر. نينا كوتلر هي ماثيماتيشن وخدت ديجري من ستانفورد، وبعدين قررت انها تبقى دكتوره، فدخلت كليه الطب وبقت radiologist. And she was brilliant, سواء as a mathematician or as a radiologist. Naturally, artificial intelligence caught her interest, and she went into artificial intelligence in the very early days. وتدرجت في الرولز بتاعتها في الارتفيشال انتليجنس لغايه ما بقت التشيف انفورميشن اوفيسر لراديولوجي بارتنرز. وزمايلنا اللي هنا عارفين راديولوجي بارتنرز هم اكبر راديولوجي سيرفيس بروفايدر في امريكا، لوحدهم carry out 10% of all imaging procedures في امريكا. About 25 million studies per year. وده ده فرصه انها actually to deploy AI at scale. نينا محاضرة هايلة، بس أنا هسيب الحكم عليها ليكم في الآخر. And she manages to transfer her knowledge in the most simple manners, regardless of the sophistication and complication of it. Nina, I hope you're listening, and I hope you're online. I know it's about 4 o'clock where you are, 4 o'clock in the morning. We will start with your recorded presentation. I know it's about 25 minutes. I've seen it. And we hope to engage you in the Q&A session afterwards. Please welcome Nina to our conference, and I hope you find her presentation as informative and as entertaining as I've always seen her presentations. Thank you very much. I think we can shift this.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be talking to you today at your conference, and what I'm going to be talking to you about is transforming radiology with artificial intelligence. My name is Nina Cutler. I'm a radiologist and the Associate Chief Medical Officer for Artificial Intelligence at my practice Radiology Partners, and I'm also an Associate Fellow at the Stanford AD Center. So let's get started. Here are my disclosures. I want to start with a problem, and that's because it is such a big problem that we have to manage. In the past, we've always had the issue of how do we improve the quality of what we're doing, how do we improve the outcomes, how do we drive value, how do we decrease cost, and those are still issues. But an issue that is overwhelming that right now is that imaging volume is outpacing radiologist capacity. We don't have enough to do the amount of work that is coming to us. And this is not a new problem. This happened back, starting in the year 2000, when I was just entering my intern year. The growth of imaging services, now this is in the US for Medicare, the growth of imaging services over the next 11 years grew at 80%, but the amount of radiologists in the US to manage that volume grew at 25%. So what do you do in that setting where imaging volume is outpacing capacity? Well, at that time, we had technology to help us. In the exact same time, around the year 2000 and going forward, we had PACS come out, and PACS was a disruption of technology. It increased our efficiency significantly from throwing up films and marking things on films to being able to scroll through them, especially in 3D imaging, and see things pop out at us rather than looking from image to image. Now, this made a massive difference. Unfortunately, the problem has continued. Demand is still outpacing capacity. Now, these are US numbers, but this is a worldwide problem. So in the US, CT and MR, cross-sectional imaging is growing significantly, 9% and 6% increase per year, whereas the number of residents that are available to, the increase in residents that are available to interpret these exams is only increasing at 1 to 2% per year, and people are retiring. So we have over 1,800 open job postings on the ACR website, and that does not represent all of the jobs out there. And I know you guys are feeling it as well. Radiologists are getting burnt out. We're trying to work faster. We're trying to work harder. We're taking more days, less time off. You go home, you read more exams, and this is just showing what is happening with this widening gap between the demand for radiologists and the supply of radiologists. So this goes up to the year 2020, and it has not stopped. So what do you do in this case? Well, the only thing you can do if you don't have new technology is you just try to read faster and read more. But that decreases the value we provide. There's no way to do more with less. If you try to do that, you have to cut corners, and you might make more mistakes. You might not take the time to call a referred clinician or look up a best practice. That decreases our value, and we know that we also need to increase our value. So why is this an issue? Well, like Steve Jobs says, if you don't cannibalize yourself, someone else will. And in the same way, if we don't solve this capacity problem, then someone else will solve it for us. And generally, when someone else tries to solve your problems or does solve your problems, they don't solve them in the best way. I recommend that we need to figure out a way to manage this ourselves. Now, I do think artificial intelligence will help. Artificial intelligence and technology in general has the ability to increase efficiency, but also maintaining or improving quality, and hopefully also decreasing cost. I mean, if you could do all three things at once, the only thing that I know that could do that is technology. But we have to be very particular and intentional about how we implement artificial intelligence to make sure it is augmenting quality and improving efficiency. So why is that? Well, you'll say, well, we've done this in the past, Nina, there's no worries, we can do it again. We've deployed PACS, that's technology, let's just deploy AI the same way. Unfortunately, PACS is an IT application, and AI is a clinical application. So we can't deploy AI the same way that we deployed PACS by having IT information technologists train us just on the technology. We need clinicians that are available to help educate radiologists about how to properly consume this clinical technology. The other problem is, anytime you are putting two things together, the value in getting the value from both of them is never automatic. So we would certainly not want the first scenario in red, where you put two things together, like you're creating a team, and that team is performing less than any of the individuals on that team. Like, that is clearly bad. Something better is in blue, but not optimal, where you put a team together and they just perform as well as one of the people or some of the people on that team, but not as well as they could. What we want is the third option in green, where the value of two things together is greater than either alone, and I do think we can get there. So let's talk through these with artificial intelligence and radiology. So how can you put an AI system next to or with a radiologist and get less value out of it? Well, that comes from bias. And bias happens in every single segment of the AI workflow. And we're going to talk about this later. But if you don't prevent or educate against bias and do other things to mitigate bias, then you are going to get a 1 + 1 is less than 1. What about the next one? AI plus radiologists equals 1. Well, that's when you think about replacing radiologists. Let's just have the AI do what the radiologist does, and then take the radiologist out of the picture. Maybe you're saving a little bit of cost, but you're not adding any value. You're still getting the value that you had before, and that's autonomous AI. Now, in the US, there is no FDA cleared or approved autonomous AI. There is some in Europe. But I would suggest that we want to go beyond autonomous AI. We need to expand beyond getting the value for just what we are replacing. We want to get more value. Remember, we have a call to action in healthcare, and we need to add value back into the system. So how do you do that? Well, AI plus radiologists has the opportunity to augment each other if we think about this intentionally. Okay, so clearly we don't want the first two, and we want the last one. So how do we get from here to there? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. We already talked about our call to action. We need to do something different. We need to manage this volume, and at the same time, we need to provide value. So how do we augment the radiologists so that we have an outsized impact? We'll talk about a couple of things. First, how we need to make a change. Now, I'm going to talk to you about this because I have a lot of experience in deploying artificial intelligence. And it's hard to identify what the benefit is of artificial intelligence just through doing research. You can get the academic idea of where AI is going to help, but unless you're deploying it and deploying it at scale, it's really hard to know what it's going to look like. But we've been using AI in our practice since 2015.
Wow.
And in that time, we have deployed or processed millions of examinations, both through imaging AI and natural language processing AI, and now starting to use large language models. And the vast majority of the radiologists in our practice are exposed to some kind of artificial intelligence. Many are using more than one. Now, these numbers are already out of date, which is why I have the little plus next to them. They're more than a year old, but you get the idea that we have deployed quite a bit of artificial intelligence. We've deployed it clinically, live and at scale, and that's what gives me the experience to have some lessons that we've learned that I'll talk to you about today. Now, in the beginning, we deployed it in the background, and what I want you to concentrate on is not that there's a lot of numbers that we gathered, but we had lots of data. And what I would do, and what my AI team would do, is since it was deployed in the background, we would take a look at any discrepancies between the AI and the radiologist and analyze them to see where it was coming from. So what does that look like? Well, we took our data, which were images and reports, and we put them into a cloud-native system in which we had artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence would have computer vision review the images, and it would have NLP review the RAD report. And then we would compare the two together. If there was a discrepancy between the two, we took that to our AI team where we did adjudication of those discrepancies and used that to create peer learning or learning lessons that we then use to educate the rest of our practice before deploying these clinically live. So with that, I'm going to go through just 3 lessons that we learned. And these are lessons about how, number 1, AI can improve radiologist accuracy. Number 2 is going to be about how radiologists can improve AI accuracy. And number 3 is going to be about how the both can be deployed together to get an outsized impact. So let's start with number 1. Here's a 50-year-old male with history of suspected PE. So we got a PE exam, a CT pulmonary angiogram, and there was no PE. The AI didn't find a PE, the radiologist did not find a PE. But what the AI found was probably the reason for the exam, which was probably chest pain. And that is because they had a rib fracture, so maybe they had pleuritic chest pain. But because we got a history of suspected PE, we were not looking so closely at the ribs, we were looking closely at the vessels, and we missed this finding, or AI augmented us, because I think we as humans were biased by the history. There's another case with left-sided flank pain, and you can see the cause for the left-sided flank pain. There is left-sided hydronephrosis, and that came from a distal left ureteral calculus. But what we didn't identify were these 2 tiny foci of free air, completely unexpected. Now, the AI isn't looking at history. The AI is not looking at the hydronephrosis. In fact, the AI is narrow AI, and it was looking only for intra abdominal free air, and it found it. And I think we missed it because we as radiologists were biased by satisfaction of search. 52-year-old male with shortness of breath. This was during the Delta wave of COVID pneumonia. You can see that the patient has pneumonia. Well, what the AI detected was a very small peripheral pulmonary embolus that we did not see because we were biased by the extensive underlying pathology, makes several things hard to find, or by satisfaction of search. Here is a 66-year-old male that came in evaluation for stroke. So when you get in that examination, you get a CTA of the head and neck, and mostly you're looking at the vessels. You're looking for a large vessel occlusion to identify the cause for the patient's stroke. And there was no large vessel occlusion, neither the radiologist nor the AI found one. But what the AI did find was something that we were not necessarily looking for on this examination, which is a posterior C-spine fracture. And this was identified by the AI, and in this case, we were biased by the exam selection. There's another case, a 47-year-old male with a headache and subarachnoid hemorrhage. You can see the subarachnoid hemorrhage and also the dilated temporal horns of the lateral ventricles. What do you look for when you have a young person with centrally located subarachnoid hemorrhage? Well, you're looking for ruptured aneurysms. The next study that we got was a CTA. The most common location for an aneurysm is the circle of Willis. There was no aneurysm at the circle of Willis. Unfortunately, there was an aneurysm coming off the left vertebral artery and off the left pica, which is a branch of left vertebral artery down here at the skull base. Not a very common location for it, and this was something that was identified by the AI, not identified by the radiologist. He was biased by the uncommon location. Now, it's not just uncommon things, it's also subtle things, right? Most of the cases that we looked at that were augmented by the AI were things that were pretty subtle, and every single case of this is very subtle, so much so I'm going to show you the heat map, so you can even identify where the finding could be, and that makes these things hard to see. So subtle findings are difficult to detect. Now here's another 50-year-old male who came in with rib pain, so you're looking very specifically at the ribs, but you may be looking at the moderately thin slice images, 3.75. I mean, it's less than 5 millimeters. That may be standard of care for whatever location you're in. But there are 1.25 millimeters slice thickness studies that we send to the AI. We always send the thinnest slice images to the AI model. And it's a lot easier, although hard to see on both, this non-displaced right-sided rib fracture that is causing this patient's pain. Okay, more detail is visible on the thin slices. We might not always have access to them. Sometimes through our packs, we don't get the thin slice images, but those are the ones you should always be sending to your AI system. So lesson number 1, AI can help improve radiologist accuracy, and that's because AI interprets images different than humans do. We like to anthropomorphize the AI, any computer system. We don't understand exactly how it works, so we like to think it thinks like a human, but it does not. And it's those differences that added together can make it better. So let's go on to the opposite side of the coin. Lesson number 2, radiologists can improve AI accuracy. So here are some streak artifacts, some head CTs. A lot of these patients have altered mental status and they move during their examination. That causes the streak artifact, all of which are called intracranial hemorrhage by our AI system. This is something that we need to dismiss. Here is another patient that came in with diffuse abdominal pain, and the free air model found this little focus of gas in mesentery and said, hey, there's some free air, beware of this. Now, if you look at this on coronal imaging, or if you're doing what I do, you scroll up and down in the images, you're actually following the valve. You're not looking at slices or voxels, slice by slice. The AI is. And so for us, it's very easy to identify that this is actually just gas in the tip of the appendix. It is not free air. But the AI is not looking at anatomy in 3D, depending on the system that you're using. Okay, the system we were using, we're only looking at the axial slices, not the coronal, or not a thicker sort of voxel of slices. And so it's hard for AI to pick these things up. Here's another male who is status post fall. Now they have 2 cervical spine fractures. The radiologist picked up 2 and AI picked up 1. This is the fracture that the AI did not pick up. Now, why didn't the AI pick this up? Well, the AI in general is not looking at every slice of every image. In fact, or every series. In fact, it's generally only looking at one of the series of your studies. Now, that's not true for all AI, but you need to know for your artificial intelligence what images is it reviewing. And in this case, for cervical spine fracture detection, it is looking at the sagittal series of the cervical spine. And you can see this fracture is parallel with the sagittal view. So instead of seeing a lucency through the bone, you're seeing bone on one slice, no bone on the next slice, and bone on the next slice. That is very hard to pick up both for human and AI. The AI didn't find it, but the radiologist did. Here's another patient that came in with headache, and you wonder, is this high density in the right putamen, is that a problem? And it could be intracranial hemorrhage, maybe it is mineralization. Well, it ends up that we had a prior, it was present on the prior. It's very easy for us to say it is mineralization, it's not intracranial hemorrhage, because we're looking at the priors. Not all AI systems are looking at the prior studies. You have to ask your vendor. So lesson number 2, radiologists can help improve the accuracy of the AI. Why? Because humans interpret images different than AI. So let's go on to 3. If you put the 2 together, they have the opportunity to be better together if we are intentional. So how does that work? I was always told in residency when I was an earlier resident that I was adding value. And I didn't know very much, and I thought I wasn't adding value, but the idea is that if you combine an earlier resident with an attending who has been practicing for a long time, the 2 of them together are the highest quality combination. So why is that? Well, the attending has things that they have learned over their years of education and experience where they look more closely at certain areas where there's more likely to be a finding. And the resident, an earlier resident, doesn't know where to look, so we look everywhere in the bones. We're not ever always looking at the right places, but we might pick up something that is sort of edge of film finding or an unusual finding that the attending did not see. Now, we're also going to overcall too many things, and the attending can tell us when we're wrong. Unfortunately, that does not scale. There are not enough radiologists in the world. There's certainly not enough residents in the world for everyone to work together, and it would be expensive. But what if we combine radiologists with AI? So here is the same scenario. The radiologist looks at certain areas based on their education, and the AI looks at every single pixel or voxel on film. And then, based on its education and its training data, it is concentrating more in certain areas. And it's when those areas don't overlap that you get the benefit. And we found this to be true. We've run a bunch of different studies where we've evaluated to see how much can the AI augment the radiologist and how much can the radiologist augment the AI. Now this is data from our brain aneurysm model, and we found that the AI improved the sensitivity of the radiologist by 24%. It enhanced radiologist detection, or had the opportunity to enhance radiologist detection by 24%. But the opposite was also true, that radiologists found things that the AI did not, and they had the opportunity to improve the AI sensitivity by 34% if you put them optimally together. So like I said, this is true not just for brain aneurysm. We found this true for every single study or every single AI system that we have deployed. We have run it for AI systems, and when we found that AI is only picking up the things that radiologists pick up, then we don't deploy that. We need the 2 to be better than either one alone. So we're looking for enhanced detection, both from the AI and from the radiologist. So here's a graph of different AI systems that we've deployed. The medium blue or darker blue is a combination of things that were found both by the radiologist and the AI system. The lighter blue are those found only by the radiologist, not by the AI, and those in the light orange are things found by the AI and not by the radiologist. Now, I will mention that the way that we did this evaluation, we have underestimated the light blue. But in either case, it gives you the idea that we have the opportunity to expand beyond 100% to get to the benefit of the enhanced detection of both radiologists and the AI system, and that should be our goal. So how do you do that? Well, based on those lessons that we've learned, there are some things that the AI does better, and we should make sure that they are doing. And there are other things that the radiologist does better, and we should make sure that they're doing those things. You should put them together. It means that we should practice a little bit differently than we're practicing now, because this is improving quality, but we also have to improve efficiency. And by improving efficiency, you can't just plop another tool down next to you and not change how you work. No efficiency will be gained from that. You have to think about how to optimally work together. Okay, so lesson number 3, radiologists and AI are better together because we have non-overlapping skills. However, all of this requires a mitigation of bias. So let's go back to our slide about how outsized impact. Now, if you have bias in the system, you're going to degrade any impact that you get. Clearly, we don't want that, and we will be talking about that. However, we also have the opportunity to augment human intellect, right? RAD plus AI being better together. That's what we want. But what if we can do even better? How do we get to something where we're outsizing our impact even more so than the augmentation that you get naturally with AI if you decrease bias? Well, there's something that I have noticed that we get this outside impact from, and it's called priming. So let's go into that. So do you remember this case of the 50-year-old male with suspected PE? Remember, there was no PE, but there was this anterior left-sided rib fracture that the AI detected. Now, we had this case when we were running AI in the background, and when we did, all of the discrepancies came to me. I took a look at this case, I opened up the study, and because I was looking very specifically for rib fracture, I not only was able to see the rib fracture that the AI detected, but I was able to find 3 more. And 3 very subtle rib fractures that the AI did not see, and frankly, I would not have seen. And why was this happening? It was happening because the AI had found a finding that was a single finding for rib fracture, and I was going into the study looking for that one finding and complications of it. When I normally look at a CTPA exam, I'm looking for hundreds, tens or hundreds of findings. There's too much, but when your brain is primed to look for the single one, you are much more accurate, much more sensitive and specific in finding more of those. So I was able to find 3 more that neither I nor the AI system found. And this was true for rib fractures, but it was also true for all of the other AI that was utilized. So it's an important thing to think about in how we can outsize our impacts, not only for that finding, but also for complications of that finding. When there was a rib fracture, I went in and found some really subtle pneumothoraces that were not called either by the AI system or by the radiologist, but because my brain was primed, looking very specifically for only rib fracture and complications of that, I was far more specific and sensitive in identifying those. So AI has the ability to prime your brain by finding things that you might not have initially seen, and it allows us to go back in that exam and find even more, and that can provide an outside gain. So going back to integration being the future of radiologists plus AI, that means all of these things that the AI were finding, if they find something else, utilize that to go back in, and that will help prime our brain to drive more value. Okay, now none of this is going to happen unless we mitigate bias, and that's what we're going to talk about next. And I'm also going to mention too that the examples I've been giving you so far have mostly been about quality. Where we're moving to in the next phase is the phase that we really need to concentrate on, and that is to improve our efficiency. There is some efficiency gained by putting radiologists together with AI and being intentional about what we do. If we're not spending all of our time looking at certain things for certain uncommon findings, but the AI is detecting it for us, and then we go back in. That is a way to improve our efficiency. We're going to find far more of that in workflow AI that will be created more and more this year and next year. Okay, so let's talk now about mitigating bias. So going back at the benefit of AI not being automatic, if you don't manage bias, it's going to overtake anything, and you won't get the benefit of augmentation, and you certainly won't get the benefit of priming. So how do you think about bias? Well, I think about it in 3 different segments. We can find it both before you deploy your AI system, concurrently while you are deploying, so while you're reading, and the AI is working directly with the radiologist, right? Most AI systems are not autonomous. They are working as an adjunct to the radiologist, so you have the human and the AI working together. That's deployment. And the third one is post-deployment. Now, we have some regulations for the first, right? AI has regulatory oversight before you deploy, before you can sell an AI system and commercialize it. It has to go through some regulation. In the US, that's the FDA. But there's really nothing, or nothing yet, in the deployment and post-deployment section. And I would suggest that even pre-deployment has some things that could be improved. approved. Now, it's not that the regulatory agencies are not thinking about it, they are. It's just taking them a while to figure out what is the optimal way to manage this. So let's talk about each one individually. Let's start with the pre-deployment, and I'm going to talk about the kind of bias that you can see before you deploy an AI, which should have to do with the AI creation. Now, this is something that should be regulated, but when you deploy an AI system, just because it has been regulated and approved does not mean that it's going to work in your environment. And why is that? It's because of a kind of sample bias that causes the brittleness of AI, or the lack of generalizability. And that's if the AI system data was trained on data that look different, even a little bit different, sometimes a lot different from your data, then you're not going to get the same degree of accuracy that was identified during the regulation. So how could things be different? Well, maybe you have a different manufacturer for your scanner. Maybe you've got a different protocol. Maybe the quality of the examination is different. Your patient population or disease prevalence is different. There are so many things that create variability within your data that you can't rely just on for your regulatory agency to know that it's going to work with your data and your workflow. You're going to have to test it out yourself. So let's go into the second part, which is deployment. Now, deployment, there's not much of anything, but I do think we can mitigate some of this bias that occurs between the radiologist and the AI. So what are those biases? Those biases are two different types. One is sort of an over-trusting, and that's automation bias, where you accept a false positive from the AI system, or complacency, where you accept a false negative. So these biases of over-trust are only a problem when the AI is wrong. On the other side, there are biases related to distrust, where you don't trust the AI enough, and you disregard the AI true positives and the AI true negatives. So automation bias is not something that you only see with artificial intelligence. It's with any automated or computer system. And it happened when GPS first came out, and this picture was not hard to find. There were a lot of people that were driving, following the GPS regardless of what it said. Sometimes they were turning the wrong way down one-way streets. Sometimes they were turning into parked vehicles, or in this case, they were following the GPS into a lake. And when you asked them, they said, well, I was just following the automated system. And that's when the automated system, this kind of bias takes control, is when it happens in an unconscious way. It's when it overrules our own normal thinking. So this can happen in radiology too. Now, this is an example that we saw in our practice, where it was an AI looking for brain aneurysm. So if you're looking for brain aneurysm, you need contrast, right? So the AI should be evaluating the series that has the contrast in it. Unfortunately, by mistake, the AI pulled the series that didn't have contrast. And what you can see on the left is the axial non-contrast study. There's a little brightness there, and that is from partial volume artifact with a portion of the sphenoid bone. And the AI looked at that, thinking it was a post-contrast study, and identified that as a brain aneurysm. The CTA images were totally normal, but unfortunately, the radiologist mentioned a possible left ICA aneurysm in their report. They hedged. Now that's automation bias. Complacency is the opposite, either the negative predictive value. That means when the AI says that the study is negative for a finding, how often is it right? That's negative predictive value. Negative predictive values are inversely related to disease prevalence, and because disease prevalence tends to be low, negative predictive values tend to be high, which means when the AI tells you the study is negative for a finding, it's often right, like 99.9%. That means that only a very small number of the times where the AI says the study is negative is it going to be wrong. And it's easy to be complacent in that scenario where every time the AI says negative, we look a little less carefully. And this is not a conscious bias. All of these are unconscious bias, and we can miss the finding when it is present. Okay, let's go into the last one, which is after deployment. Bias is also implicit in this area, And this area is an area that's evolving. A continuous validation of the accuracy of an AI model is something that is still in process. There is no best practice for it. There are some doing it. Now, one is the way that I talked to you about before, where you take your images and your report and you put them both into AI systems, one that will look using computer vision and one NFP, and compare the two. And if the two are different, those get adjudicated by a team that then evaluates the differences to determine where the AI is saying something different than the radiologist. Now you can do this, and you can do this even at scale. The only issue with it is that well, number one, you're assuming in general that the AI is right if you don't have capacity to adjudicate everything. If you want to do this at scale, you're talking about quite a few exams to review. You need a radiologist to have a full-time job doing this. If you don't have capacity, then you might not adjudicate, so that's one problem. Second problem is that all of this is happening after the fact. So you're not determining that there could be an issue with the AI system until after the radiologist consumed the AI results. And at that point, it is already too late. So what you might want to do is look at other ways. Another way is looking at the data. If you look at the data coming into the AI system and understand, is that data in or out of distribution from the training data from the AI system? If there were a scaled way that we could do that, then that would be able to, number one, identify the issues, but also identify it before it goes to the radiologist. There might also be a way to look at the AI system. Maybe you have two AI systems that are both looking at the same data and see if they are separating in their recommendations and identification. So there's a few ways to think about this. There's nothing that has become the standard of care. I imagine we're going to have to do a few different kinds of this in order to do a good job at a scaled and more automatic evaluation of model performance over time. Okay, so ultimately we have to mitigate bias. We have to do it in all three segments: deployment, during deployment, and after deployment if you want to get value out of your AI system. And that means both. If you want to get improvement through augmentation, where 1 + 1 and radiologist plus AI is better than either alone, or if you want to get to the part where you can even improve that more through priming, we need to figure out ways to mitigate bias. All right, so today we talked about our need to solve our capacity problem and deliver more value. We have to do both at the same time. We've seen a lot more concentration on the value portion and improving accuracy, but if you think very carefully and appropriately about how do you put the AI together with the radiologist, you can also improve efficiency. And it's going to be an area that we need to concentrate on even more. I think we're going to start to see more and more AI that is involved in workflow and radiologist reporting this year and next year. And with that, that will hopefully transform our ability to review exams more effectively and more efficiently. Number two, AI can help by augmenting the radiologist to create an outsized impact, and that's only going to happen through augmentation and priming. It's not going to happen through replacement, but we're only going to get that if we mitigate bias and if we change how we practice. So I will end showing you this great quote from Darwin, which I think is going to be very true for us over the coming years. It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the most responsive to change. So I think we might have a few minutes for questions, hopefully, and with that, I would like to say thank you.
Nina, thank you very much. I'm sure everyone